Today is Saturday, October 1st. We are talking about the beverage many of you might be enjoying right now, coffee. Surveys show about 2/3 of Americans enjoy at least one cup of joe every day. So in honor of International Coffee Day today, we thought it would be fun to do a deep dive into what the science says about coffee, especially since there always seems to be different studies saying different things about how healthy or not coffee really is. So to bust myths and break down the facts, I'm chatting with Doctors Andrea Love and Jessica Steier, the hosts of the Unbiased Science Podcast, a show that provides objective analysis of the public health topics relevant to our daily lives. We'll talk about whether coffee will actually help us live longer, if caffeine withdrawal is a real thing, whether you need to rethink your decaf drink, and so much more. Welcome to the Newsworthy Special Edition Saturday, when we sit down with a different expert or celebrity every Saturday to talk about something in the news. Don't forget to tune in every Monday through Friday for our regular episodes, where we provide all the day's news in 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. It's now time for today's Special Edition Saturday. Dr. Jessica Steier and Dr. Andrea Love, thank you both so much for coming on the Newsworthy.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for having us, Erica.
So I have worked in news for a long time now, and it at least seems like I've heard of so many different studies that are coffee related over the years. They all either say coffee is going to let us live longer and save us from cancer, or that it's going to cause cancer. Why do we hear about so many conflicting or confusing studies when it comes to coffee?
Well, I can jump in with the history, the older studies. And then, Andrea, I know you've done a review of some of the newer ones, but a lot of the older studies weren't properly controlling for things that we call confounders, which are factors that can actually interfere with the relationship between coffee and those outcomes of interest. So a lot of those older studies were not doing a good job controlling for the fact that a lot of people who drink coffee also happen to be smokers or were more sedentary and weren't exercising as much. And so those were the factors that were actually impacting outcomes.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, as science has evolved, as our understanding of physiology has evolved, we've been better able to parse out, nuance and differences amongst populations when we're looking at the effect of the exposure to something. But I also think it stems from a bigger issue is that people are always looking for like the next quick fix, right? The next thing that's going to help them live longer, help them lose weight, help them do this and help them do that. And coffee is the most widely consumed psychoactive stimulant in the world. It is consumed in nearly every culture around the world. And so, of course, it is going to be in the public eye. People want to know, is it killing us? Is it making us invincible? And so that's why I think a lot of these studies are under scrutiny. And that hasn't changed over the last few decades.
Okay, so let's talk about what the actual science and data shows when it comes to the pros and cons of coffee. So first, what does the data say when it comes to potential health benefits of coffee?
We're seeing a possible association between coffee and decreased mortality, which is a good thing. We also see, based on some observational studies, that coffee may actually offer some protection against Parkinson's disease, type 2 diabetes, liver disease, including liver cancer, and heart attack and stroke. Just to be clear, that doesn't mean that if you drink coffee, you're going to be protected against these things, but there does seem to be some association.
And actually, a recent study, it just came out a couple of months ago, was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. And they looked at individuals who drank coffee, who drank moderate amounts of coffee, high amounts of coffee, or didn't drink coffee. They basically included 171,000 essentially. And these were people that didn't have cardiovascular disease, didn't have cancer. And they found that very broadly speaking, individuals who drank between 1.5 and 3.5 cups of coffee per day, even with either nutritive sweetener, so sugar or artificial sweeteners, were up to 30% less likely to die during the study period.
And when we're looking at some of the benefits, are we more looking at the beans themselves or the caffeine aspect?
Hard to parse that out unless you're doing a randomized controlled trial where you're just doing like powdered caffeine. But generally speaking, the wakefulness, the better focus, these sorts of symptoms or consequences of consuming coffee are linked to caffeine because we know that that acts on that transmitter in the brain. However, there are other substances in coffee, things like riboflavin, vitamin B2, magnesium. There are some other plant chemicals like polyphenols and quinic acid and diterpenes. And these can also have some beneficial effects in the body, although their contribution in a cup of coffee is probably less well understood.
What does the data say about any potential cons or, is coffee unhealthy in any way?
When you get above a certain threshold, typically above 400 milligrams of caffeine a day, and that's going to be beyond, 5-6 cups of basic drip coffee, that can have some undesirable effects, such as anxiety, such as restlessness, such as insomnia, and also increased heart rate and other sorts of cardiovascular risks. So, for example, if you have some underlying health conditions that are linked to your cardiovascular system, you may be one of those people that has to drink less coffee. Or if you're prone to anxiety, you may be someone that has to drink less coffee.
And also, high intake of unfiltered coffee has been associated with a mild increase in cholesterol. Those who are pregnant or trying to become pregnant or nursing are advised to limit caffeine intake. So that doesn't mean you can't have any at all. But I think the recommendation is if you're pregnant, you should limit to about 1 cup. If you're nursing, you should limit to about 2 cups. And then the other thing is that we all prepare our coffee differently. So I treat mine like a dessert and I'm adding cream and sugar. And all of those things are fine in moderation, but they can add up, right, in terms of sugar and fat. So the American Heart Association recommends no more than around 6 teaspoons of added sugar per day for women and then 9 teaspoons for men. So you just have to be mindful because these things can add up if you're having multiple cups.
So the National Coffee Association recently said espresso-based drinks are more popular now. Any info about drip coffee versus, 1, 2, 3 espresso shots?
Typical coffee, drip coffee, has about 12 to 16 milligrams of caffeine in every ounce. Espresso has 63 milligrams of caffeine in an ounce, and 1 ounce would be a single shot, and 2 ounces would be a double shot of espresso. So it's 4 times more caffeine by volume than drip coffee. Traditional things like lattes and cappuccinos are using unsweetened milk products, but we know that a lot of people add flavors and sweeteners and whipped cream. And so maybe that takes it away from what a traditional espresso-based beverage is. But just remember, again, factor those sorts of things in to your overall diet as well.
Still ahead, do you get headaches if you go without coffee? Our guests share whether withdrawal is a sign you need to quit or not. Plus, is decaf more or less healthy than regular coffee? That's all still to come, but first, a quick break to thank our sponsors. The Newsworthy is brought to you by Rothy's. By now, you know I'm a big fan of Rothy's shoes, and that People magazine even named Rothy's The Point the best flat for its 2021 Style Awards. But did you also know that Rothy's has all different types of styles, from sneakers and loafers to ankle boots and more? And no matter what you buy, everything Rothy's makes helps the planet. They've repurposed millions of single-use plastic bottles into their signature thread that goes into every single one of their products. I don't know how they do it, but every pair of Rothy's shoes I've gotten is everything I want it to be. Comfortable, durable, stylish, and sustainable. I appreciate every time I pull their shoes out of the box, and they immediately feel comfortable and ready to wear all day long. Step up your shoes and accessories and get ready to be asked, are those Rothy's? Plus, get $20 off your first purchase at rothys.com/newsworthy. That's ROTHYS, rothys.com/newsworthy. The Newsworthy is also brought to you by BetterHelp. There are times I catch myself getting frustrated at a situation, whether it's part of parenting or running a business. But just like I want to teach my son to do, I do best when I take a deep breath and keep a more positive problem-solving mindset, no matter what it is I'm facing, big or small. And I've learned a therapist can really help me keep the mindset I want to have, making it easier to not only accomplish my goals, but to also enjoy the process of getting there. And that's what it's really all about, isn't it? I personally think everyone should give therapy a try. And BetterHelp is a convenient, accessible, affordable way to get started with it. It's entirely online. You just fill out a brief survey and then get matched with a therapist. And you can switch therapists anytime until you find the right one for you. When you want to be a better problem solver, therapy can get you there. Visit betterhelp.com/newsworthy today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/newsworthy. Okay, now back to my conversation with Doctors Andrea Love and Jessica Steier. Okay, so let's talk about caffeine withdrawal. Is it a real thing?
Yes. Typically, people who consume more coffee or more caffeine are more likely to experience withdrawal or have more severe withdrawal symptoms. but you can actually experience it even if you're a 1 cup a day drinker. Typically, studies that look at caffeine withdrawal, they tend to identify about 5 different clusters of symptoms, and those are headache, fatigue or drowsiness, dysphoric mood, including depression and irritability, difficulty concentrating, and even flu-like symptoms like nausea, vomiting, and muscle pain or stiffness. So that can occur 12 to 24 hours after stopping drinking caffeine and can last 2 to 9 days after stopping drinking. And then in terms of how do you combat this, typically there's a stepwise approach that's recommended. So basically this systematic method of gradually reducing caffeine consumption over time by substituting either decaffeinated or non-caffeinated products.
Getting withdrawal symptoms for caffeine, is that a sign that you should reduce your caffeine intake?
It's a situation where you're getting into kind of this cycle, right? So if you continue to try and amp up how much caffeine you're consuming to get the same desirable effect, you're going to have to continually increase your caffeine. And we know that high levels of caffeine can have additional undesirable effects. So the general consensus would probably be to say, yes, you might want to try and wean yourself down off of it. Find something else to help you with your alertness, your concentration, your wakefulness. I don't know if there's a perfect solution, especially in our society where there are, high demands and everybody's kind of chronically sleep deprived and all of that. But I think there are ways to incorporate other sorts of healthy practices in your life to account for that.
What about decaffeinated coffee? Is it any more or less healthy compared to regular coffee?
There's a lot of misinformation about decaffeinated coffee. I think about the processes that are used to remove the caffeine. But just like regular coffee, starts out as green, unroasted beans. And then the beans are warmed and they're soaked in liquid to dissolve and remove the caffeine. And there are all these different ways that it can happen, sometimes using water alone, sometimes using a combination of water and other solvents. So decaffeination removes about 97% or more of the caffeine in coffee beans. So a typical cup of decaf coffee has about 2 milligrams of caffeine compared to caffeinated, which has about 95 milligrams of caffeine. So it's actually a really great alternative for folks who maybe suffer some undesirable effects from caffeine consumption, but really enjoy the taste of coffee. So no, if you like it, if you like the taste of coffee, it's a perfectly safe alternative.
Is it a myth that you can't count the water that's in coffee as towards your total 8 glasses or whatever it is?
I mean, technically, you'll pee a little bit more initially because the caffeine and that, affects your blood filtering in your kidneys, and it does act like a mild diuretic, but it still counts towards your daily liquid intake for sure.
What is important to really know about how the data works when we're looking at these studies?
It's important to understand that there's no quick fix. There's no, single cure. And we're more looking at population level trends here, right? We're saying, okay, well, of people that drink coffee on a daily basis in moderate amounts, it seems to have a somewhat protective effect. Now, whether that is because individuals who are drinking coffee also have a more active lifestyle. They also do other things like go to preventative health screenings and things like that are also going to improve their health outcomes. It's hard to say. And that's why the gold standard is that randomized controlled trial. Again, when we look at these population level data, it's not a hard or fast rule. It's just that no, coffee in moderation is not harmful. There are some data to suggest that it actually can be helpful.
And there are always going to be outliers, right? And coffee, caffeine is going to impact people in different ways based on things like size and weight and gender. There are all kinds of differences. So my husband can have, 4 cups of black coffee and not even feel it. And if I have 2 cups, I'm jittery. It kind of exacerbates my anxiety.
So when you're actually looking at the data and the amount of coffee someone's getting, does tolerance have anything to do with the results of drinking that amount of coffee?
The more caffeine you're consuming on a more routine basis, the quicker you may build a tolerance to it. In terms of the data that are looking at things like mortality rate reduction, they actually did include participants that drank up to 8 or more cups a day. So those would be our really excessive coffee drinkers. And they actually found that the protective benefits were still true even at those really high amounts of caffeine intake. And this is all observational, so it's not a randomized controlled trial, right? You're not controlling every single other situation, every other variable. So you can't say that this definitively concludes that coffee lowers the risk of dying, but there certainly is an association.
So overall, how much stock should our listeners put in the variety of coffee-related studies that are out there?
I would say not much. It's not going to be a panacea. It's not going to prevent you from getting cancer or getting Alzheimer's or getting, a lot of these things that have genetic components. It's not going to cure you or prevent you from getting that. It's not harmful. So, try not to let people scare you away from drinking coffee if you really enjoy coffee.
There are these splashy headlines that can make us believe either that things are really good or really bad about coffee. And again, be mindful of things that you're adding to coffee. But enjoy it. Don't be scared by headlines. Coffee is great in moderation.
We want to give a big thank you to our guest today for taking the time to do the research on coffee and for sharing it with us. The third season of the Unbiased Science Podcast debuted this week, so be sure to check it out. And follow the show on social media. You can find them at Unbiased Sci Pod. And of course, also check out the Newsworthy's regular weekday episodes. We keep you updated on the stories you need to know every Monday through Friday in our 10-minute news roundups. So we'll be back on Monday. Until then, enjoy your morning coffee and have a great weekend.